I started the group, found every single member, organized every single event, and then one day a stranger walked up to someone else and said, "You must be the one who started all this." And there I was, 3 feet away, holding the printed seating chart I had made at 11 o'clock the night before, with little color-coded sections because I wanted people to actually find their friends. The stranger was still talking, still smiling at Divya like she'd been handed a gift. Divya smiled back, not a deflecting smile, not an "oh, actually" smile, just a warm, receiving smile. The kind you do when someone gets it right. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just stood there holding that chart, and I thought, okay, so that's where we are. 6 weeks before that, I was sitting at my kitchen table at midnight scrolling through Facebook groups with one hand and eating cold pad thai with the other, which tells you everything about how glamorous this origin story is. The World Cup was starting in 4 days, and I could not find a single local watch party for expats from my country. Not one. There were groups for the big nations, obviously. There are always groups for the big nations. But for us, nothing. I closed the laptop, looked at the takeout container, and thought about how much I did not want to watch the opening match alone on my phone again. That was the whole reason. That was it. So I made the group myself. That sounds simple, but building it from zero meant I spent about 4 hours over 2 evenings hunting down every expat Facebook page I could find, diaspora communities, cultural associations, one very niche page dedicated entirely to a specific regional snack. I drafted individual messages to strangers, not copy-paste blasts, actual messages, because I knew if I got a mass recruitment DM, I'd ignore it immediately, and I assumed everyone else would too. Something like, "Hey, I'm local, I'm building a watch group, totally informal, would love to have you." Embarrassingly earnest. I sent maybe 40 of them, 23 people said yes, and I remember staring at that number thinking, oh, this might actually work. The first watch party was at my friend Amara's living room because I didn't have enough space, and she owed me a favor. 8 people. 8 strangers I had personally recruited off the internet, crammed onto mismatched sofas with their shoes off, watching the national team's opening match on Amara's TV that was frankly too small for the room. I'd printed a match schedule, double-sided, laminated, which in retrospect was a lot, and I brought 2 bags of snacks and some drinks, and I was so nervous before people arrived that I rearranged the snack table 3 times. But then everyone walked in, and within maybe 12 minutes, we were all screaming at a near-miss goal together, and I remember standing in the corner thinking, I cannot believe this worked. I genuinely cannot believe it. After that, it grew fast, faster than I expected, and honestly, faster than I was ready for. Within 2 weeks, the group had 30 people, and the living room situation was very clearly not going to cut it. So I found a sports bar about a mile from the transit stop that had a back room they'd rent out, negotiated a minimum spend instead of a flat fee, made a shared spreadsheet for RSVPs, and started following up with the venue every few days because I'd learned from a previous experience that "we'll have it ready" means wildly different things to different people. I was doing all of this on my lunch breaks and at night, and I want to be clear, I was not complaining about it. I loved it. I loved that 30 people I'd found on the internet wanted to watch soccer together badly enough that I was now on a first-name basis with a bartender named Greg. Kezia found the group in that second week, and from the first party she came to, she just got it. She showed up 20 minutes early without being asked, helped me rearrange chairs, and at some point during the match, she materialized beside me with a drink I hadn't asked for and said, "You need this." She was warm and funny and completely unafraid to tell me when something wasn't working, which is genuinely rare. By the third party, we had a pre-event ritual. She'd arrive early, I'd have already moved 3 tables, and we'd spend the setup window talking about everything except the actual logistics. She was the first person who made the whole thing feel shared rather than just mine. I didn't realize how much I'd needed that until she was already there. Divya came in at the start of week 4, introduced through a mutual contact who posted in the group. "My friend Divya just moved to the city. She's obsessed with the team. Can she join?" I said yes, obviously. That was kind of the whole point. Her first message was this long, enthusiastic paragraph about how much she loved the group concept and how excited she was to finally find her people and how she'd love to help with anything we needed. It was genuinely warm. I read it and felt that specific kind of pleased you feel when someone new gets exactly what you were going for. I typed back a welcome message, added her to the details thread, and thought, great, more hands, the group keeps growing. I had no framework yet for what I'd love to help might mean in practice. The first sign came about 5 days after Divya joined. I'd posted the RSVP for the next event, same way I always did, just a plain text post in the group with the date, the venue, a headcount link. Normal. The next morning, I opened the group and there was a second post from Divya for the same event. But hers had a graphic, a proper graphic with a little design to it, her name styled at the top. Join us for the next watch party. RSVP here. With a different link. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't wrong exactly. She hadn't announced a different event, hadn't said anything that was technically untrue. But the effect was, if you were new and you saw both posts, you would absolutely assume she was the one running things. And I told myself maybe she just wanted to help make it look more professional. That was the story I told myself. What I didn't account for was that people would actually use her link. And they did. Like new attendees who found the group that week, people who'd been lurking and finally decided to come, a couple of friends, they showed up at the door and made a beeline for Divya because her graphic was the last thing they clicked. She was right there in the entrance in this coral blazer, and she greeted them like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. And they thanked her for putting it all together, and she just accepted it. Not oh, Priya's actually the one who organized everything. Not even a redirect, just a warm smile and so glad you made it. I was standing maybe 10 feet back holding the sign-in sheet. Nobody looked for me. On the walk home that night, I ran the whole thing through my head about 6 times. And every time I got to the part where I should have been annoyed, I talked myself out of it. She didn't claim to have founded the group. She didn't say anything technically wrong. She posted a graphic. People assume things. She didn't correct them, but is that her fault? Am I the kind of person who needs everyone to know it was my idea? That felt bad to be. I had a whole internal monologue about being generous and not hoarding credit and how the group being good was the actual point. By the time I got home, I had almost fully convinced myself I was being petty. Almost. There was this small, stubborn thing in my chest that wasn't convinced. I should have listened to it. A few days later, one of the longer-standing members, a guy named Femi, who'd been there since Party 1, posted a long thank you message in the group. Like a real one, not just a quick thanks for this. He talked about how much the group had meant to him during the tournament, how rare it is to find this kind of community when you're abroad, and he addressed it specifically to me, by name. Priya, this wouldn't exist without you. I read it and felt a complicated mix of genuine warmth and, embarrassingly, relief, like some small part of me needed someone to just say it out loud. And then I scrolled down and saw that Divya had reacted to his message. Not with a heart, not with a like, with red exclamation marks, 3 of them, bang, 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 right on the message that said my name. Then Femi added a follow-up, something like, and Divya, you've been such a great addition too. And Divya replied immediately. She said something like, okay, someone throw me a party, with a laughing emoji. And the group laughed back with a string of S, and she did a little, I'm kidding, follow-up. It landed as a joke. Everyone received it as a joke. But I sat there reading it, and something about the timing felt calibrated. Like the joke was cover for a claim. I couldn't have explained it to anyone in a way that didn't sound paranoid, which is the particular trap of this kind of thing. It's designed to be deniable. By the time I put my phone down, I had the specific feeling of someone who is starting to understand the rules of a game they did not agree to play. And then the third thing started, and this one was harder to name. Divya had a habit, and I want to be precise about this, of joining conversations she hadn't been part of. Priya would be in a thread with Tomás about which sports bar had the better screen setup. 3 messages in, and suddenly Divya's reply would appear between them, not responding to the thread, responding to Priya as if Tomás hadn't spoken at all, pulling the whole exchange toward herself like a magnet under a table. It happened 4, maybe 5 times across 2 weeks. And the thing is, every individual instance had a totally reasonable explanation. She was enthusiastic, she was helpful. But Priya started to notice that Divya never inserted herself into a thread unless Priya was the one who'd started it. Kezia said it out loud over coffee on a Tuesday. And the specific memory Priya has is not of the words, but of the cup. And she had both hands wrapped around a ceramic mug with a chip in the rim, and she pressed into it like it was keeping her steady. Kezia leaned forward across the small cafe table, voice dropped, even though no one was near them, and said, "She keeps making herself the face of things you built. Have you noticed?" And Priya wanted to say no, not because she hadn't noticed, but because saying yes out loud made it real, and making it real meant she had to do something about it. She just kept looking at the chip in the mug. Kezia waited. Priya went home and did what she always did when something made her uncomfortable. She argued against herself. She sat at the window with a throw pillow pressed to her chest and ran through the charitable version of events until she almost believed it. Maybe Divya just had big energy and didn't realize how it landed. Maybe Priya was the kind of person who got territorial about something that was supposed to be communal. That last one stuck. It's the one that's designed to stick, the voice that says, "Who are you to claim ownership over a group chat?" She wanted to be the person who didn't make a big deal of things. She wanted to be easy and generous and not the woman who reads a crime into every act of enthusiasm. She nearly talked herself all the way out of it. And then she spotted the sign-off. She was scrolling back through the group feed, not looking for anything, just checking if anyone had questions about the next event. And she saw it for the first time only because she was moving slowly. At the bottom of Divya's RSVP post, "Your host, D. She scrolled up. Another post, 3 days earlier, "Your host, D." A third, the week before. Priya sat there blinking at the screen. No one had established a host role. Priya had certainly never called herself that. It was such a small phrase. 4 words, italicized, breezy. And it had been accumulating in the feed like sediment, invisible until you looked at the whole column at once. The 4th watch party ran exactly like the other 3, except that Priya had done all of it, booked the room again, confirmed headcount, printed a seating chart with the tables labeled by match, and Divya showed up in a fuchsia blazer and immediately started taking photos. Not candid crowd shots, posed group selfies with her self-centered, arms around people, huge smile, and the whole room in the background. She posted 4 of them to the messenger group before the first half was over. In every single one, the caption mentioned the vibe, the turnout, the energy. Not one caption mentioned who had organized the event. Not one caption mentioned Priya at all. Priya saw the post from across the room and kept her face exactly still. Tomás said it the way people say things they think are just facts. Friendly, easy, not a mean bone in his body, which somehow made it worse. He was talking to someone Priya had never seen before, one of those people who finds a group through a friend of a friend and shows up for the first time in week 5, and Tomás had his arm half raised in the direction of Divya across the room, and he said, "Oh, she organized all this, Deween," just like that. Priya was standing literally 2 feet to his left, holding a cup of chips, and he didn't pause. She heard the words arrange themselves in her head and felt her stomach drop like a phone off a counter, that specific sickening second before it hits the floor. She excused herself. That's the thing Priya remembers most clearly, that she said sorry 1 sec to nobody and walked to the bathroom like everything was fine. Inside it was loud in a muffled way, the match audio bleeding through the wall, and she stood at the sink and turned the cold tap on and looked at herself for a long moment. She had spent 2 weeks telling herself the confusion was contained to a few people at the door. New arrivals who'd seen Divya's RSVP first. People who didn't know better, but Tomás had been there from almost the beginning. If Tomás had the wrong story had spread. And Priya wasn't in a position to correct it mid-party without looking. She knew how it would look, unhinged. She turned off the tap and went back out. She sat at her kitchen table that night and did something she hadn't let herself do before. She made a document, not a vindictive one. She kept telling herself it wasn't vindictive, it was just organized. Screenshotted Divya's duplicate RSVP post, the Your Host D sign-offs, all 5 of them in a row, the group selfie captions with no mention of an organizer. She put them in chronological order on her laptop screen and sat back and looked at the whole thing. When they were separate, she could argue each one away. Laid out in a timeline from week 4 to week 6, they made a shape, a clear, deliberate shape. She picked up a highlighter and realized she had no idea what she was going to highlight. There was just too much of it. She drafted the message to Divya 3 times. The first draft was long, Too long paragraphs. She kept adding evidence like she was building a court case, which told her something about how she was feeling that she didn't want to sit with. She deleted it. The second draft was 3 sentences, clean and direct, and she read it back and it sounded cold, confrontational, the kind of thing that could screenshot well out of context. Deleted that one too. The third draft was somewhere in the middle, and she sat with it for 20 minutes and then closed the app without sending it. Her phone clock read 1:14 a.m. She set it face down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling, and the thing she kept circling was, what if Divya just said she was being too sensitive? What happens then? Kezia did not have patience for the ceiling-staring spiral. Priya called her the next morning, and within about 40 seconds, Kezia said, "Stop. You are not imagining it. I have watched this happen in real time at your own events." Her voice wasn't angry. It was the very specific firmness of someone who has made her mind up and is waiting for you to catch up. She said, "If you don't say something, she will keep going, and in 6 months you won't recognize your own group." Priya sat at the kitchen table and nodded at a video call thumbnail and felt something finally go still inside her. Not the anxiety going away. More like it stopped moving around and landed somewhere she could actually look at it. She knew what she needed to do. She just had to decide she was allowed to do it. Then Divya sent this announcement for the 5th party. It went to the whole group, 42 people by this point, and it was polished, properly formatted, with the venue name and start time and a bullet list of logistics. Every single bullet said, "I've arranged," or "I've confirmed," or "I'll have printed." 3 times. Priya counted. The venue Priya had rebooked 2 days earlier, the head count Priya had sent to the bar manager that morning, the seating system that had been Priya's from the beginning, all of it repackaged in first person, sent group-wide, with Divya's name in the sender line. Priya's name was not in the post, not once. She read it twice and then put her phone face down on the table, not in anger exactly, but in the quiet of someone who has just run out of ways to be charitable. The 5th party, Priya had printed a seating chart, color-coded by which tables had clear sightlines to which screens, because she always thought about the details nobody else thought about. She was holding it when the woman walked over. She had a warm face, mid-40s, a national team scarf, and she went straight to Divya with both hands out and said, "You must be the one who started all this. Thank you so much. This community means everything." And Divya smiled, not a small, deflecting smile. A full receiving smile. She said thank you. She did not say anything else. Priya stood 3 feet away with the color-coded seating chart in her hand and did not move. The paper was slightly warm from the printer, and she remembers that specific detail, and she doesn't know why, but she does. And then I looked up. Tomás was standing maybe 6 feet away, jersey, cap, beer in hand. And he was watching, not the match, not the crowd. He was watching the stranger thank Divya for something I built, and his face had this expression I recognized because I'd made the same face before. The face of someone who knows the right thing to do and is very quietly deciding not to do it. He looked at me. I looked at him. He picked up his beer and turned back toward the screen. That was the moment I understood that this wasn't just a Divya problem. The confusion had been living in this room for weeks, and nobody had thought to correct it, including people who knew better. I drove home in complete silence. No music, no podcast, nothing. Just the city scrolling past the windows in long amber streaks, every traffic light turning green like the road was trying to get me somewhere faster than I was ready to go. I wasn't shaking. That surprised me. I'd spent so many nights that month rehearsing how I'd feel if it got worse, furious, humiliated, a mess. And instead, I just felt very, very settled. Like I'd been asking myself a question for 6 weeks and someone had finally accidentally handed me the answer. By the time I pulled into my parking spot, I already knew what I was going to do. I just needed to sleep on it first to make sure I actually meant it. I wrote the message at 8:47 in the morning with coffee going cold beside me. Not at midnight, not in the heat of anything, morning, daylight, clear-headed. I'd written 3 versions the night before and deleted all of them because I could feel the hurt in every sentence, and I didn't want her to read my hurt. I wanted her to read the facts. The final version was 2 short paragraphs. I said I'd noticed a pattern across the last few weeks where event posts and announcements had been attributed in ways that didn't reflect who actually organized them, and that I wanted to address it directly before it became a bigger issue between us. Warm, specific, not a single exclamation point. I reread it 4 times, changed one word, and hit send before I could second-guess the word I'd changed. The reply came in 11 minutes. 11. I noticed that. Divya didn't need time to think about it. She already had a version of events she was comfortable with, and she just handed it to me, wrapped in hearts. Oh my gosh, I never meant to take credit. I just wanted to help however I could. I'm sorry you felt that way. 4 sentences, 2 exclamation points, 0 acknowledgement of anything specific. Sorry you felt that way. The apology that apologizes for your feelings without touching the thing that caused them. I read it twice and felt something I can only describe as tired. Not devastated, not even surprised. Just tired in the way you get when you've been generous with someone for too long and finally have to admit it wasn't reciprocal. I sat with it for maybe 2 minutes. Then I typed back, I hear you. Going forward, I'll be clearer about how we communicate the group's events publicly. That was it. I didn't explain. I didn't list the evidence I'd screenshotted. I didn't tell her I'd been second-guessing myself for 3 weeks because I didn't want to be the kind of person who reads malice into helpfulness. I just closed the loop, put the phone face up on the table, and drank my coffee, which was now completely cold, and I drank it anyway because I was done performing composure and ready to actually feel it. The private conversation was over. What I did next was for the group, not for Divya. The pinned post took me 40 minutes to write, and it was maybe 9 sentences long. I went through 12 drafts because I kept catching myself sounding either defensive or preachy, and I wanted neither. What I landed on was just the story. Hey, in case anyone's curious about how this group started, I found this Facebook expat page in late June. Frustrated there was no local watch group, sent about 30 individual messages to strangers, and got 8 people to a borrowed living room for the first match. Here's roughly how it grew from there. Dates. Numbers, my name, once at the top, warm tone, no accusation, no subtext anyone had to decode. I pinned it and closed the app and went for a walk because I didn't want to sit there refreshing. Kezia replied first. Of course she did. I was here from the very beginning and every word of this is true. Thank you for building something real, Priya. 12 words and I felt my chest do something embarrassing. Then the replies started stacking. Little warm messages, reaction hearts, a couple of people saying, "Oh, wow, I didn't know the full story." One person said they'd assumed the group had always just existed, like it had materialized from the internet fully formed. Which, honestly, that's what it looks like when someone does invisible work well. You don't see the 30 individual messages to strangers. You just see the watch party. Tomás sent me a private message that evening, short, slightly awkward, exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd been carrying a small guilty thing around all day. Hey, I saw the post. I didn't realize the full picture. I'm sorry I wasn't more careful about what I said. That was it. No explanation of why he'd said Divya organized all this to a newcomer while I was standing 2 feet away. No promise to do better, just a simple sorry, the kind that doesn't try to be more than it is. I replied, thank you for saying that. And I meant it, not as absolution, not as a clean slate, but as a genuine acknowledgement that he showed up a day late and said the thing. Sometimes that's what people can manage, BM. Divya went quiet, not dramatically. No exit, no goodbye post, no public reaction to the pinned origin story. She just stopped. No your host D sign-offs on anything. No inserting herself into threads mid-conversation. Her avatar sat there in the member list, present and still. I noticed it the way you notice when a noise you've been tuning out finally stops. The silence itself becomes a sound for a second, and then you adjust, and then you realize you're just fine without it. I didn't reach out. I didn't check in. I kept running the group exactly the way I always had, which was the whole point. The 6th watch party happened on a Thursday evening. I showed up with a printed seating chart, same as always, and set up the back room with Kezia, same as always. When people started filing in and saying, "Priya, this is great, thank you," it didn't feel like vindication exactly, because that implies I'd been waiting for it, and I was done waiting for things. It just felt normal, correctly calibrated, like a room where the furniture was finally back where it belonged after someone had slowly been moving it a few inches at a time for weeks. I ordered a drink, found a spot near the screen, and watched the match. I didn't hold the clipboard once. Walking home that night, I thought about the version of me from 6 weeks earlier, alone at that kitchen table, a national team scarf on the chair, sending awkward individual messages to 30 strangers and hoping someone would say yes. She didn't know she was building something that would need defending. She was just trying to find her people. And I thought, the thing about doing invisible work is that you can always make it visible. Not loudly, not in someone's face, not in a way that burns the thing down, like just clearly, once, at the right moment in the right place. That's all the pinned post was, not a victory, just a record. A few days later, I pinned one more post in the group. Just, see everyone at the next one. Match info to follow. 8 words. I hit post and set my phone on the coffee table and went back to the show I'd been watching. No screenshots, no documentation, no anxious refreshing. Just a group that I built. That was still mine, humming along on a Thursday night. Divya was still in the member list. I left her there. The group didn't need me to be petty to prove I was right. The origin story post was already pinned at the top of the chat, sitting there quiet and permanent. That felt like enough. It was enough. Here's what I want to know. Was Priya right to stay quiet and post the origin story instead of calling Divya out in front of everyone? Or would you have said something right there in the room?